Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another Chubbs Reviews, where I bring you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And today, got a pretty interesting game to talk about, at least for me. Game that I've slowly fallen in love with, but it actually, it's a flawed game. Final Fantasy 15. Yeah, if you can't read the XV in the title, it's 15. I've reviewed the Final Fantasy 7 remake. I hated it. You can go check out that review. And that is a critically acclaimed game. Like, people like it critically. I hated it. I played the Final Fantasy 7 original, which is the oldest game I've ever reviewed. Go check that video out. One of my favorite videos I've ever made. Very long, though. And now, going from that to the oldest Final Fantasy I've ever played, probably can play, really, to the newest Final Fantasy out there, made I think like 4 or 5 years ago, Final Fantasy 15, and it's the Royal Edition, and that is the only edition you should get. And I'm not playing the game, the base game. I understand that this game was terrible upon release, and I actually get that through just owning the Royal Edition and playing through the DLCs. There's a lot to take in with this game. Just know, for one, a warning and also a flaw with the game. It is like a Lego set. It is very pieced together. In order to understand the full experience of this game, you got to have a little bit of commitment. Not because the game is even super long. It's actually pretty short compared to most RPGs, especially if you focus the story. But there's a movie to watch before the game. I did a review on that movie, and that's gonna cost you a few dollars. I couldn't find it free on any site. The Final Fantasy 15 Royal Edition was only like $15. That comes with almost all the DLCs. Comes with four DLCs, but only three story ones. You're still missing one, which is Episode Arden, and that is actually a great DLC. I would say that's just as good as the other ones. You need to get that. That's like $5. So there's another $5. You need to watch an anime series on YouTube, which is at least is free, but that shit literally explains the backstory of our four main characters. Yeah, I haven't even talked about the game at all yet. But I'm just saying, this is what you need to delve into. There's different endings, and they're not different endings, but different ways or characters you can play as in different chapters in some of the DLCs and in the chapters in the game. And you should definitely experience those. There's a lot to fucking take in. I just spent 2 minutes just talking about all this extra shit, and it's kind of all necessary. It sucks that it's not all in the main game. Like, these DLCs that you need to play, that are each DLC is based off one of the characters. There's four characters. You got your main character, Prince Noctis. He's probably the worst character of them all, but basically he's the chosen one. He's the prince. That's his character. And I mean, I honestly didn't hate him as much as a lot of people do. His voice acting is okay. I think the voice acting in general in this game is pretty okay, at sometimes great, with like Arden especially, which is the main villain of the game. So his voice acting is great. Uh, and yeah, so it's definitely interesting. But Prince Noctis is just, he's the least developed character, but definitely the center of attention. So, and he's the coolest, so he gets the least kind of character development. Then you got Ignis, which is kind of like the mom of the group. Even though he's a guy, he's just like the father figure to Noctis growing up. He was relied on by the king to just watch over Noctis as he grew up, and he's just known him for a long time. Like I said, kind of like the fatherly, motherly figure of the group. We got Gladius and Gladiolus, which is basically Prince Noctis's bodyguard, a member of the Shield Glaive or whatever, which are basically these bodyguards for king's people, and also personally trained Noctis. And you got like you. I'm only knowing all this because of DLCs and like that anime series on YouTube, especially Prompto. Prompto is probably my favorite character, which he has some of the more annoying voice lines, but also some of the best. But his DLC is great. His backstory, being like a chubby kid and wanting to be Prince Noctis's friend, and how that all worked out, and how Princess Luna is involved. I know I'm just throwing out names right now, but it's just like, it's actually fucking interesting. I know it's a Lego set, but it's a well-made Lego set after it's all said and done. If you bought this game when it came out, I'm sorry. Like, you got fucked. Even if you bought the season pass, you still get fucked. Even if you buy the Royal Edition, you still gotta buy the movie and episode Arden. So I spent about $23 on this whole experience, 25 maybe. But to be honest, it was kind of worth it. If you're like willing to do that, it's like 30 hours, 40 hours altogether of all that of entertainment, and it is an experience. The game is an experience. Okay, it starts off pretty much your Prince Noctis leaving your hometown, basically going to your wedding to marry this princess, and you're supposed to marry her, and a peace treaty is supposed to happen between your home place, which is guarded by this like magic barrier because your family's all magic. It's Final Fantasy. It is fucking fantasy hardcore, but there's also like supercars. Like the opening of this game, you and your boys are just pushing the car because it breaks down. And if you're in the mood for some bromance shit, this is the game. The dialogues are corny at times, but I kind of fucking like them at times. Um, you know, these guys really are. I actually really come to love the group, especially by the end. And like I said, if you get all these little pieces put together, people really do develop. Prompto is, you know, constantly trying to make himself, you know, explain himself and make sure he's needed in the group, and putting his effort in. Gladius is the big brother. You know, it's really great to see this group, and that's like I said, the game is an experience. It's a very easy game though when it comes to the gameplay and shit. You know, you play as Noctis pretty much the entire game except for the DLCs. But when you play as Noctis, his main thing is he throws a sword and teleports to it. He can teleport all the time, and it uses your MP, and then that shit slowly builds up. But the game is easy in the sense that you hold circle or you hold your B or whatever to. I think it's just circle. This game might just be on PS4. To do automatic combos. You just hold the button to do combos. You hold square to dodge and block everything, and parry even. You just hold square. So it's very easy, and you can have fun with it. And I would say that's what this game is like 90% of the time. Like there's a lot of huge boss fights in this game that come down to just holding one button, but they are just epic looking and sounding. The music is crazy. It's like most of the time your experience is I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I'm having tons of fun. And if you were just like, I wanted to make this video and review this game because I played it obviously, but like I was so hesitant on buying this shit. Like it took me a while to be like, damn. Because I hear a lot of negative things about Final Fantasy 15. Maybe not as much as anymore, because like when I was looking up videos to compare it to my feelings, it was mainly a lot of people like me that is like, okay, this game has flaws, but it's still, you can love it. You can really enjoy it. It's not Final Fantasy 7 or anything like that, but I enjoyed this better than the remake. It gets a little corridory and linear at the end, but the story was pushing me forward enough to, like, the characters were pushing me enough forward. The gameplay was good enough. I didn't do a lot of the side missions. I actually don't recommend you do a lot of the side missions. The game is half and half of two things. It's really weird. You could tell they had their mind all over the place making this game. For one, the story's crazy, but what you love about this game, besides the characters, is the world building. The world building and the world that you're on of Eos or whatever. The cities you go to are just fucking gorgeous. You know, you're driving around in the car. This is one of those games too. If you don't like sitting in cars, you're not gonna like this game that much. But have you ever just like wanted a beautiful map, and you can tell like one of your companions to drive, and you can just sit back and look at the fucking scenery, and then you got all these cool playlists on your radio of all the old Final Fantasy games. So like 90% of my music for this game was Final Fantasy 7 theme music. But also, I mean, obviously, this is Final Fantasy Square Enix. Like, even when their Final Fantasies are bad, their music is great. Final Fantasy 15, great music. Again, not as good as Final Fantasy 7 original, but, I mean, that's comparing shit like that. Like, that's comparing a classic 10 out of 10 to... It is cool just to see how far this shit has came. And that's really the big thing for me here, is just to see how far this series has come. I might play some more Final Fantasies in between. I'm definitely hyped for Final Fantasy 16. Most likely, like, you know, they just announced that. Oh, excuse me, on the PS5 showcase not a while ago. So that's mainly what got me interested in this. Even though I don't think Final Fantasy 16 is going to be anything like this. They just go all over the place with their directions with things. But yeah, if you were ever hesitant to get the Royal Edition for 15 or 16, whatever weird ass price it was on sale for, it's probably not on sale anymore, but it will be again eventually. And you could always just watch like some of the DLCs on YouTube too, like Episode Aria, and you don't have to pay for that. Even though the gameplay, oh yeah, the DLC gameplay, like the DLCs are so essential, like that's so sad, and they like two of them, I would say 2 or 3 of them are meant to be played in the middle of the game. Like at one point, Gladius leaves the group and comes back with scars on his face. You get to play in his DLC what he went and did. though his DLC is the least story interesting. It's a lot of gameplay fun. It was just like a Devil May Cry type of thing, and he was just tanky and hard hitting. He played completely different than Noctis. And then you go to Prompto's DLC, and it's like a third person shooter with like explosives and rocket launchers, and he learns this crazy story about who the fuck he is, and you just get more detail in the world of the game, and it's like that is essential. And then there's a cool ass boss fight, but again, I literally don't think there was there was a way to fail the boss fight at the end, but it was very easy, but it was insane looking. It was a great set piece. And then I played episode Arden, which was just a great backstory on our villain. Final Fantasy 15 is one, surprisingly good, like I've come to love it, and two, surprisingly has a great villain. Arden is probably the best character in the game, and he's the villain, and he just pulls strings from behind. He has a really tragic backstory. He's kind of a fucking god, which makes him cool. He's voice acted tremendously. Like, even people who hate the other voice acting loves Arden. Like, Arden's hands down the best voice actor, or whoever's voice acting him. I should know this, but I don't. But yeah, you play his DLC, and that's got a lot of fun gameplay, and probably the longest one. All the DLCs are about an hour long. Like, no matter what online says, they're all about an hour and 20 minutes long. Every single one of them. And then there's the very last one you should play at the end of the game is episode Ignis, which happens kind of in the middle of the game, but like at one point, like, slight spoiler but not really, at one point you're like one of your party members become blind for in the middle of the game, and they don't really explain why. He just says some shit happened, and then in the DLC it explains why, and it's just really fucking tragic. Like, man, Ignis is so selfless. Like, I know I shouldn't like spoil too much, but I don't know if anyone's even gonna watch this far in the video. But anyway, Ignis is the most selfless guy ever. Gladiolus is the most protective guy ever, and Prompto's just your coolest best friend that just wants to be like a part of the group. Like, he's not a dickhead. He's just awesome. I want to smoke weed with that guy. Okay, it's just, yeah. This game does have flaws though. Like I said, the game is extremely easy, very pieced together. Two halves of the game. The first 7 chapters are completely open world, filled with shitty side quests, and not even that great of a main story really going on at that point. But you got this glorious open world and all this XP to grind for. But I really didn't do that many side quests. I maybe did 20 to 30, and that's it. And some of them are great. There's like 3 of those side quests were actually fucking cool. But then, like, you could just tell the game is littered with shitty side quests. And then when you get to like chapter 9, it's very linear. It's like Final Fantasy VII Remake, or just how Final Fantasy is when it's linear. So it's very, like, you can tell they didn't know what the fuck they were doing, or one half of the game is for, you know, when you start up the game, it says for all-timer fans of Final Fantasy and newcomers. The combat is definitely for newcomers because it's simple and easy. It's not turn-based anymore, which is what Final Fantasy usually was. So if you're like really in love with original Final Fantasy shit and you were tempted to get this game, then fucking don't, I guess. But I mean, if you're open-minded and you've been tempted to get this, I do suggest it. I gave you my breakdown on what you got to do to get the full story. And yeah, it's definitely just all interesting, man. It definitely is. The flaws in the game, though, like I said, some of the combat, some of the missions. Second half of the game is very linear, but the story in the second half of the game is tremendously better. The writing is way better. So as much as the open world was cool, the writing there was ass. So like the second half of the game is cooler. And I don't know, it's just weird, but all together, I come to appreciate the first half of the game because of like the shit that goes down in the second half. So I did like the game. It makes you always, when you finish this game, you always look back and be like, wow, I missed that time with the bros on the road, because that's what this is. At the bottom line is like a bros on the road trip, and that's what it starts off as, and it turns into so much more. It's a tragedy about sacrifice and life and brothers, and just it's actually pretty nuts. Like, shout out Square Enix for decently coming together and writing something, even though it took them like 4 years of DLCs, and they are just trying to get a lot of money out of you. Hopefully they can release the next Final Fantasy complete. That's my hope. My final verdict on this, man, as much as I've praised it and all that, it is going to be it's a solid just 8 out of 10. It's a little bit better than a lot of things out there. I definitely recommend it if you were at all interested. But if this isn't your thing, then I understand. Don't get into it. But if you were at all curious, definitely do get into it. thank you guys so much for watching. This was a very special game for me. Actually, it turned into one. So I always enjoy Prince Noctis and his adventure. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe down below. See you guys in the next video. Peace out.